Have you ever wondered how a single country managed to turn paper promises into the chains that bind entire nations? Think about it. Why is it that when a small country collapses under debt, the whole world feels the shockwaves? Yet, when the United States prints trillions, the system doesn't collapse, but somehow tightens its grip? This isn't just economics, it's power disguised as finance. And tonight, we're gonna unravel how America trapped the world in debt, and why your own future may already be caught in the same invisible net. Before we dive deeper, tell me where you're watching from. Drop it in the comments right now. And hey, if you want more deep stories like this, hit subscribe. It helps more than you think. All right, let's peel the story apart. The mystery begins not in modern skyscrapers or digital stock markets, but centuries ago, in the quiet birth of banking itself. Back then, money wasn't plastic cards or green bills. It was metal, heavy, and real. Gold and silver had a natural weight, an anchor of value. But humans, being both clever and dangerously ambitious, asked a question. Why carry tons of metal when a slip of paper promising that metal could do the same job? That small question would eventually build empires, collapse nations, and set the stage for a trap so subtle, most never notice it until it's too late. Fast forward to the 20th century. World War II ends, and the planet lies in ruins. Except for one nation, the United States. Its factories are intact, its gold reserves overflowing, its economy booming. And here's the twist. While Europe and Asia struggled to rebuild, America wasn't just rebuilding. It was rewriting the rules of the global financial game. In 1944, at a quiet resort in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, representatives from 44 countries gathered to design a new system. They agreed, the US, dollar would be the anchor, tied to gold at $35 an ounce. Every other currency would tie itself to the dollar. In simple terms, trust the dollar and you trust the world. Sounds stable, right? But here's the catch. By making the dollar the world's measuring stick, America created a system where every other country's survival depended on US policy. If America sneezed, the world caught a financial flu. If America printed more, inflation wasn't just an American problem, it became global. This wasn't just clever strategy. It was the birth of financial empire. For 2 decades, the system seemed unshakable. Nations traded, economies grew, and the dollar reigned supreme. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming. America was spending far more than it earned. Vietnam War, social programs, the space race. Dollars were leaving the US faster than gold reserves could back them. Countries like France started asking tough questions. If dollars are as good as gold, can we please have the gold instead? Ship it over. Charles de Gaulle literally sent French ships to New York, demanding America honor its promise. And here's where the illusion cracked. In 1971, President Richard Nixon made a shocking announcement. The US would no longer exchange dollars for gold. The golden promise was gone. Overnight, the dollar became nothing more than faith paper, backed by trust in America, not by metal. The world was furious, but what choice did they have? The dollar was already woven into every trade deal, every reserve, every debt contract. The trap had sprung. From here, things got darker. Once freed from gold, America could print money at will. But printing alone doesn't guarantee control. You need others to need your money. And that's where oil enters the stage. In the mid-1970 seconds after the oil shocks, Washington struck a deal with Saudi Arabia. Price oil only in dollars, and America will protect you. Soon, the entire OPEC cartel followed. This meant if Japan wanted oil, it needed dollars. If Germany wanted oil, it needed dollars. If Brazil wanted oil, it needed dollars. The world's most vital resource was locked to American paper. This petrodollar system forced every country to hold dollars in reserve, no matter what. Imagine a casino where the house prints its own chips, then demands everyone else buy chips before playing. That's the genius and the cruelty of the system. But let's follow the timeline further. With petrodollars secured, America expanded its reach. the IMF and World Bank institutions designed at Bretton Woods started offering loans to developing nations. The deal was simple. Borrow dollars, fund your growth, but accept our conditions. Those conditions: cut subsidies, privatize industries, open markets to foreign investment. On paper, it was help. In practice, it hollowed out local economies, making them more dependent on foreign capital and vulnerable to dollar swings. Countries that resisted soon found themselves shut out of trade or punished by market panic. The 1,982nd debt crisis in Latin America is a perfect example. Nations borrowed heavily in dollars, but when US interest rates soared, repayments doubled overnight. Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, once rising, suddenly collapsed under unpayable debt. The same script repeated in Africa and Asia. One country after another chained itself to loans it could never fully escape. And every repayment, every dollar of interest, flowed back to American and Western banks. This wasn't charity, it was extraction, polished up with nice words like structural adjustment. Now here's the deeper twist. By trapping nations in debt, America didn't just gain money, it gained leverage. Imagine negotiating trade deals or political alliances when you owe billions to the very hand that's shaking yours. Debt became the new colony, invisible yet crushing. No need for armies when contracts and interest payments achieve the same obedience. But what about the breaking point? For that, look at 2008. The global financial crisis exposed the rot. Wall Street gambled with toxic assets, banks collapsed, and yet the solution wasn't dismantling the system, it was doubling down. Central banks worldwide rushed to print more money, cut rates, and most importantly, buy US debt. Nations that had spent decades warning about American irresponsibility suddenly lined up to purchase US Treasury bonds. Why? Because the dollar trap left them no safe alternative. When the storm came, even critics ran back into the cage. And today, the story continues. As of now, global debt has soared past $300. Trillion in amount no one can truly comprehend. But here's the kicker. A massive chunk of it is denominated in dollars. Whether it's an African nation trying to fund roads, a South Asian company importing machinery, or a European bank stabilizing reserves, the dollar is everywhere. If the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, debt burdens explode worldwide. If the dollar strengthens, currencies collapse. If Washington sanctions you, your economy suffocates. The chains aren't metal, but they're real. But what about attempts to escape? Surely, if the world saw the trap, someone would try to break free. And yes, some did. In the early 2000s, countries like Venezuela and Iran floated the idea of selling oil in euros instead of dollars. China quietly began agreements with partners to settle trade in yuan. Russia, too, tired of sanctions and dollar dominance, started building alternative payment systems. Yet each attempt met resistance. When Iraq, under Saddam Hussein, announced it would price oil in euros, not dollars, what followed was invasion, chaos, and his downfall. Coincidence? Maybe. But many economists argue otherwise. Libya's Muammar Gaddafi planned a Pan-African currency backed by gold. Weeks later, NATO bombs rained down, and his regime collapsed. It's not conspiracy, it's a pattern. Challenge the dollar, and you risk isolation, sanctions, or worse. Meanwhile, America learned to weaponize its advantage even further. After 9/11, the US didn't just fight terror with armies, it tightened its grip on global finance. New laws made sure that nearly all international payments routed through the SWIFT system could be tracked, blocked, or frozen if Washington demanded it. Countries suddenly realized that it wasn't just about owing debt, it was about survival. Defy the system, and your access to the lifeblood of trade could vanish overnight. In the 21st century, bombs were no longer the primary weapon. Banknotes were. Now let's zoom out. If the origins were gold, the rise was Bretton Woods, the breaking point was Nixon's shock, and the fallout was the petrodollar, then what were the failed fixes? Because yes, there have been many. The European Union tried to create the euro as a rival. It worked, partially. The euro became the second most used reserve currency, But even after 2 decades, it still lags far behind the dollar. When crises hit, from 2008 to the pandemic, investors still ran back to the US dollar like moths to a flame. China built the Belt and Road Initiative, funding projects across Asia, Africa, and Europe in yuan loans. But here's the irony. Many of those loans are still tied indirectly to the dollar because global trade pricing, especially in commodities, remains dollar-based. Even cryptocurrencies hailed as the future of money crashed under volatility, regulation, and the sheer inertia of the dollar system. Alternatives exist, but none are strong enough to break the cycle. And here's the shocking data. Today, over 58% of global foreign exchange reserves are still held in dollars. Around 90% of all forex trades involve the dollar on one side. Over 80% of global trade is invoiced in dollars even between countries that have nothing to do with the US. Imagine India trading with Brazil. Why should they use dollars? And yet they do, because trust, habit, and infrastructure all point back to America's green paper. This is not natural. It is engineered dependency. But let's not just blame governments. The trap also hits ordinary people. In countries like Argentina or Turkey, citizens rush to buy dollars when their own currencies collapse. Why? Because the dollar isn't just America's currency. It's seen as safety itself. People save in dollars. Businesses price in dollars. Even weddings in some countries are settled in dollar gifts. And when crises worsen, this creates a vicious loop. Local currencies fall, debt in dollars grows heavier, and the cycle repeats. Entire generations live under the shadow of a foreign currency they cannot control. So what does this mean for us now, in the present moment? Look at the pandemic response. The Federal Reserve printed trillions to save US markets. But that ripple didn't stay in America, it surged across the globe. Emerging economies suddenly faced crushing debt payments as their currencies weakened against the soaring dollar. By 2022, Sri Lanka defaulted, Ghana teetered, Pakistan begged for bailouts. Meanwhile, US debt itself ballooned past $30 trillion. Here's the paradox. The debtor is the master, not the servant. Because when America borrows, the world funds it. And when America spends, the world adjusts. And now comes the uncomfortable question. What happens when this system finally cracks? No empire lasts forever. Rome's coins were debased until worthless. The Spanish Empire drowned in silver, only to sink into irrelevance. Britain once ruled with the pound sterling until 2 world wars broke its back. America's dollar dominance looks unshakable today, but so did theirs, once. The warning signs are already flashing. US debt to GDP ratios are soaring. Political gridlock makes debt ceiling debates a global drama. Rival blocs, BRICS, Asian financial alliances are quietly building alternatives. And technology, from digital currencies to blockchain payment systems, whispers of a future not bound by Washington's printing press. The cracks are there. The question is, when does the illusion break? Now let's tie it all together with the takeaways. First, debt isn't just numbers on paper, it is power. When America holds the keys to global debt, it also holds leverage over nations, leaders, and markets. That's the invisible empire. Second, money is trust, not metal. The dollar works because people believe in it, not because it is backed by anything tangible. And belief is fragile. It can last centuries or collapse overnight. Third, history repeats. Every empire that weaponized its currency eventually faced the same fate: overreach, debt, and collapse. The only uncertainty is timing. So here is the warning. The world is running on borrowed time and borrowed money. The system looks stable only because everyone pretends it is. But as global debt surges, as alternatives grow, as trust erodes, the day may come when the dollar cage breaks, and the fallout will make every previous crisis look small. Imagine a world where trade stalls, debts implode, and currencies swing uncontrollably. That is the nightmare lurking behind the green paper. And here's where you come in. Don't just watch history happen, understand it. Ask yourself, why does my country borrow in dollars? Why is my future tied to decisions made in Washington? And what happens to me, to my family, if the system changes overnight? These questions matter because the story of money isn't abstract. It's your rent, your job, your savings. The chains of debt aren't just around nations. They're around you too. So if you found this eye-opening, subscribe now. Because stories like this aren't told in classrooms. They're buried under jargon and reports. And trust me, we're only scratching the surface. The next chapters of this story are being written right now. And you'll want to be here when the illusion finally cracks.